Hi, I'm BECMI Berserker and welcome back to my channel, and to yet another exploration of a classic BECMI adventure module. This time when I say classic, I really mean it. We're going to explore what is probably one of the most iconic published scenarios ever, the game with which most players of the 80s broke their RPG cherry, whilst also being the graveyard of many aspirational adventurers seeking a better life but finding a quick death instead. I am of course talking about B2, The Keep on the Borderlands, by none other than Gary Gygax himself. Before I begin my deep dive into this module, it's worth acknowledging that Keep on the Borderlands holds a special place in the memories of a vast number of players, and also in the lore of Dungeons & Dragons itself. This is manifested as frequent reference in many publications and conversations, and also as a 25th anniversary return to the Keep on the Borderlands, which was released in 1999 to cater to 2nd edition AD&D, to celebrate 25 years of Dungeons & Dragons and not specifically Keep on the Borderlands. And most recently there was the release by Goodman Games that included a 5th edition version of the game, as well as the original version printed inside. The book also coming with a cover that paid tribute to the original. So whatever your first impressions of this module are, there is a certain amount of credit you have to give it, due to it being a reference point for what Dungeons & Dragons means to so many players. Although originally printed in 1979, Keep on the Borderlands was published for mass distribution in 1980, available as part of the basic rules, and it was also available as a standalone purchase if required. The cover art was by Jim Rosloff, using a simple blend of shades and colours to show us a battle between a group of adventurers and some pig-nosed orcs. Some might consider this quite a basic illustration by today's standards, but we must remember D&D was 6 years old when this was released, and TSR's art department was far from developed. What's of interest to note is that the cover was never updated from this early design to the look and feel of BECMI, in the way that the 1981 cover of X1 The Isle of Dread was updated in 1983. Part of me thinks that was a shame, but another doesn't. What do you think? Keep on the Borderlands was framed as an introductory module, as you can see here, and it was made up of just 28 pages. The cover was made of just 2 panels, consisting of the main map of the adventure, referred to as the infamous Caves of Chaos. It didn't make the greatest of DM screens, so you may have had to come up with some other device if you wanted to prevent secrets being observed by prying eyes. Focusing on the map on the inside cover, we can see that the Caves of Chaos were made up of 11 distinct areas, each labelled with a letter of the alphabet, as you can see here. So you might have made an early observation that there was an effort to deliberately theme each one of these. If that's what you thought back in 1980, then it was accurate. What you may also notice is that the map shows gradient lines, so this is in fact a bit of a chasm. After the ground level caves we have entrances 50 feet up and then 75 feet up and then 100. What isn't made clear is what kind of pathways exist up to these caves, if any at all. So a DM would have to decide on that based on the information available in the module. The 11 dungeon areas did have some limited interconnectivity, but for much of the game were independent of each other, being ruled by a specific being or race. I won't get too much into that now, but hopefully what's on the screen illustrates how the Caves of Chaos as a whole is actually made up of many dungeons. What's important to note is that the scale of this map is 10 foot per square. That means that most of the rooms in this dungeon are actually quite large, and when we consider the length of the chasm itself, it measures to just under 500 feet at its longest point and 200 at its entrance. The premise of the Keep on the Borderlands is a simple one. You understand that there is a need for adventurous and brave folk, like yourselves, to face off against the forces of chaos in order to preserve the expansion of civilization. So you journey to a keep that is quite literally on the borderlands of all that is wilderness, to not only take on that noble mantle, but to also gain as much fame and fortune as you can by clearing out the nearby Caves of Chaos, where we are told fell creatures lie in wait. I just want to pause there for a moment because I think it's important to reflect on this as a concept and a reason for playing this game, because I think it strikes at the heart of old school gaming. What is an adventurer anyway? When you peel back all the exciting stuff, they're really just a chancer, a risk taker, putting everything on the line to gain fame or infamy and make their fortune. They typically start with no ambition to do any more than this. They certainly do not wake up one morning thinking that it's incumbent on them to save the world. No, to adventure is to knowingly put your life on the line for the purpose of personal betterment. If you become rich and then want to try to save the world, well, that's up to you, but no one truly starts off this way. Keep on the Borderlands leans into this adventurer mindset. You're setting off to a pretty bleak location to put your life in danger in the hope things will work out for the best. If you think about it, for you to do this, it would have to be your best prospect, so things otherwise can't be going that well for you. We are offered this map of the keep to help manage the game in this area. I've listed the keep locations for you here. Arrival at the main gate is a simple process, and the party should be let in with minimal bother, ideally heading to the Traveller's Inn to rest before doing a bit of investigating. I think it's really easy to take a look at this map and its accompanying information with a modern lens and glance over some finer details. For instance, whoever had input into this map knew something about castles. If you were to play a modern scenario, you may be told where the stables are, or the location of the warehouse. Here there is a linguistic distinction. We have a common stable and a common warehouse, which doesn't mean that just anyone can use them, but it does mean that they are the most frequently, or commonly, used by keep traffic. You will note here that there is a specific cavalry stable, which would be for the use of the guard, and we are told in the text that the cellar beneath this fortress is used for storage. What emerges is a clear delineation between normal everyday castle affairs and the military complex, which is beyond the inner gatehouse, here. We are told explicitly that access to this area into the inner bailey is off limits unless the party completes a heroic deed on behalf of the keep, or contribute 1,000 gold pieces or a valuable magic item to the place. Only then is there a possibility of meeting the castellan, which is basically a castle governor, so an official, not a ruling aristocrat. What's interesting about this framing is that it puts the party firmly in their place. They're no one special, and they do not merit special treatment. Heading to the Caves of Chaos? Well, that's nice, and thanks for the effort, but I'll sit up and take notice when you actually achieve something. Just 5 pages are given over to the description of the 27 locations of the keep, but this seems to be enough. You could argue that there is a bit of an enforced less is more approach due to the page count limitations, but the description of the keep only begins after 6 pages of introductory text, which is used to support new dungeon masters to learn how to run the game. This could have been eaten into if one wanted to be more indulgent with the keep location descriptions. As it is, they are quite basic but functional. That said, there is enough of a springboard here, and in a way, this brevity firmly hands the ball to the DM to flesh things out further. It is, if I think about it, a training tool that develops out of that initial introduction. I've told you how to play, now here's a framework, make the game your own. A good example of this soft encouragement to design your own setting is the absence of names when it comes to NPCs. All we are offered are quite bland titles like man-at-arms, captain, bailiff, or indeed castellan. Even characters we are likely to meet quite frequently, such as the trader, the curate, or priest, and the innkeeper. None are given names, and I think this was a deliberate choice. The first thing a player is going to ask when they meet someone is their name, so the DM is going to have to come up with one. Their absence demands the new DM to learn how to do this, and in thinking up a name, I dare say they'll simultaneously think up their demeanour. The two just seem to go together when first conceiving a character. And before you know it, the DM's creativity has been piqued, and suddenly they're wondering how Captain Dirk is feeling that day, especially since he's sure that Relf the innkeeper is watering down his ale. The DM is not left completely helpless in this regard. Towards the back of the module, there is a specific section on NPCs, with a rollable table for traits, if needed. Also, a list of suggested statistics if you don't want to roll up your own. The final page of the module even offers us a table to record this kind of information, so that NPCs who are recurring can easily be referred to again and again. Keep on the Borderlands offers new DMs a further tactic for kicking off the adventure, which has become a staple of most published games, and that's the table of rumours. A DM is encouraged to roll 1d20 and determine the result against this table when characters are investigating information about the Caves of Chaos. As you can see here, we have been offered 7 rumours that are false, some of them a bit naughty, such as being told that Bree Yark is Goblin for We Surrender, and, there being a fair maiden imprisoned there. If you know, you know. All of this information has the potential to bring the keep to life, as the party interact with NPCs and the DM starts naming them and giving them personalities. This gives the game the potential to be incredibly enjoyable, even before any requirement to roll for initiative. Ultimately, the keep's function is to act as a microcosm of a town, from where adventurers can set off and return to rest, sell loot, and maybe even go up a level or two. In addition, whenever there is a character death, it's entirely reasonable that a plucky new adventurer has just arrived at the keep, who seems entirely trustworthy enough to join your group. You gotta love this game. Zooming out of the keep a bit, we're offered this map of the keep's environs and the wilderness that surrounds it. One aspect of this I found interesting is the use of squares for a wilderness map, when around this time we also saw the emergence of hex maps for above ground play. If anyone has any information about this style difference, it would be good to know, specifically whether this was just a style choice, or the move to hex maps was an evolution from this style of presentation. Within this map are just 4 numbered locations, specifically a lizardman mound, housing a tribe of male and females and their young, a spider lair, containing 2 poisonous black widows, a raider camp, which is home to 12 bandits referred to as chaotic fighters, and an area that is home to what's called a mad hermit, who is a 3rd level thief, plus his mountain lion pet. Each of these areas has some decent loot in it, with all but the raiders also having magical treasure. In addition to these numbered locations, we have the obvious Caves of Chaos, but we also have this intriguing area labelled the Cave of the Unknown. We are told this is a location for the DM to develop, so the development of the DM is further encouraged to create a dungeon of their own design and place it here. Given its location, there is even scope to join it up with the Caves of Chaos, as this passage here on that main map is a bit of a loose end, and should get creative thinkers wondering why it's blocked off. Was it to keep something in, or was it to keep something out? Whichever it is, the Cave of the Unknown offers perhaps a further level to take this adventure to. Maybe a dragon lives there. It isn't unreasonable for characters to reach 3rd level by the end of this adventure, so a small green dragon residing in the wild forest might just be the icing on the cake, and I'm sure the Castellan would be mighty grateful if you installed a dragon skull above the entrance to his keep. Do you see how this game gets the imagination flowing? This map and the locations mentioned are really only here for if the party wish to explore the area between the keep and the Caves of Chaos more thoroughly. Or if you're a particularly devious DM, you could have the raiders attack a weakened but heavily laden party on their way back to the keep. That could give them a strong reason to engage with the wilderness and seek them out to get revenge. There's so much you can do here when you consider the simplicity of the text supplied. Okay, so now it's time to turn to the core of this module, the Caves of Chaos. As I mentioned earlier, the Caves of Chaos is essentially a series of 11 semi-interconnected dungeons that increase in difficulty over the course of the adventure, and all of its information is contained in just 10 pages of text. The easier dungeons are closer to ground level, with the entrances to the most difficult being near to the top. With its denizens ranging from puny but numerous kobolds up to a level-draining wight and a petrifying Medusa, there is an enormous amount of material to wade through here, including references to how these denizens interact with each other, so that a DM can insert this information into the gameplay as required. For instance, you might gain allies in defeating one set of creatures, but then find they double-cross you, or you decide to double-cross them. What's apparent with the entire setting of the Caves of Chaos is that it is pretty much an adventurer's sandbox. There's no plot, just stuff to loot, in whichever order you choose. Remember, you came to make your fortune, so that's your main concern. Get in, get out, get healed, and go again. Throughout the text we are told whether monster losses are replaced or how prepared they might be for subsequent multiple forays, enabling a DM to be prepared for returning overconfident characters. You may have left the Orc lair after taking half the tribe out, but if you leave it a couple of days, you might find a few gnolls have moved in. What's key to every adventure though is how much loot is actually in a place. Well, I've worked it out for you, and it's pretty significant, although you do have to put the work in for it. I'll let you know the detail later in the video. But for now, who or what actually lives in the Caves of Chaos? Well, for the most part it is filled with competing humanoids. Let's get that map of the caves back on the screen for you and highlight all the humanoid-filled caves. Let me now label them so you can see what type of creature make these caves their home. The module gives us scant information in terms of how the creatures of these caves interact, just the very basics to get you started. However, I find this quite empowering. I'm not having to hold information in my head about what deal the gnolls have made with the hobgoblins, or whether everyone just wants to gang up on the kobolds. I'm given just enough to build from, to form my own motivations about these groups which, although require some creativity on my part, ends up being less taxing in the long run, as what is my creation is far more easier to run or manipulate than having to consider some wider scheme that underpins everything. Again, we are being taught to be dungeon masters rather than presenters. As I mentioned earlier, the higher cave entrances lead to more difficult enemies, not accounting for the ogre of course, and we can see that here when I add the average hit dice of each humanoid race. And just for added value, characters might notice the gradient of these caves internally as they experience slopes and steps of each complex. I've only highlighted some of them here. That makes me wonder that it would be really interesting to see a 3D map of the Caves of Chaos that takes the gradient into account. If anyone has done it, I'd love to be pointed in its direction. Caves G and I are interesting. G is a perilous home to both an owlbear and a grey ooze. Considering their 5 and 3 hit dice respectively, this kind of contradicts the whole "the more powerful creatures live higher" thing, but I would explain it away as these creatures not having any conception of hierarchy. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Cave I is home to a minotaur, a swarm of sturges, and some fire beetles. The minotaur is one of the most powerful creatures in the adventure, with a whopping 6 hit dice. What makes this rather small dungeon even more perilous is that there is a spell in effect in the area that causes a loss in direction sense. This manifests as a character always travelling in the opposite direction as intended. For example, if you state you are heading west, the DM actually sees to it that you head east. This can really screw around with mapping attempts and cause characters to get lost in a relatively small complex. Seeing as there seems to be no way of dispelling this effect, I would link it to the Minotaur. Kill the Minotaur and the effect ends, meaning the players shouldn't get too annoyed at the tedium of being endlessly lost. That brings us to the final cave, Cave K, otherwise known as the Shrine of Evil Chaos, which is really the end boss level to use modern parlance. So to give it its due credit, let's focus in on it a little bit deeper. The first thing that stands out about the presentation of this area in the text is that it is the only cave to offer an introduction to the place. Caves A to J all had a very basic and functional short paragraph to set the scene, but Cave K's introduction is something else entirely. A faint, foul draught emanates from the 20-foot wide cave mouth, marking the entrance to this place. The worn path through a copse of grotesquely twisted and unnaturally bloated trees give those approaching a deep sense of unease, and as they step into the cave, a dim awareness of lurking evil begins to pervade their senses. Within, the red strata intertwines with black bulging veins running through the hewn rock walls beyond the entrance. The wide corridors and chambers lie in deathly stillness, punctuated only occasionally by faint, eerie sounds. A low groaning and shrill piping, barely perceptible even if the party remains absolutely silent and listens intently, add to the oppressive atmosphere. Clearly, Gygax was indulging in a bit more creativity for this area than any of the others, and to give him credit, I think he was demonstrating what was possible with this game. What do I mean by that? Well, how could you not listen to that text and not feel the menace of the place, let alone see it with your mind's eye? How could you not feel the malevolence that you as Dungeon Master are required to convey to your players? What the reader is feeling is completely imagined, but as the Dungeon Master uses those words, the players are there, on the doorstep of the Shrine of Evil Chaos, and they can't decide if that twitch is due to their nervousness or the appalling stench of the place. The Shrine of Evil Chaos is filled with numerous undead working at the behest of an evil priest. Let's move the map over here to make things a little easier. Now let's put the locations of these undead on the screen for you. Apart from these enemies, there are of course his evil followers, some of whom are spellcasters, referred to as adepts on the screen, which are second level clerics. If you're not familiar with old school D&D, first level clerics, or acolytes, could not cast spells. Now you might think all those skeletons and zombies might be no match for a third level cleric by the time the party explore this cave, who would normally be able to automatically turn such creatures. But these undead are all equipped with an amulet of protection from turning, meaning they are a little more resistant. The skellies might be easy to deal with, but the zombies might prove difficult unless the party's cleric is 4th level. In addition to the evil priest and his followers, there is also a level draining wight lurking in the crypt, here. A gelatinous cube hanging around the storage chamber, here. And do you remember that rumour of a fair maiden imprisoned in the caves? Well, she's in room 64, here. But she's no fair maiden. She's a Medusa, and she has turned to stone many an adventurer over the previous 5 decades. It wasn't until I actually had a copy of this module that I found out that the Medusa is also equipped with a 6-dose Stone to Flesh potion, a fact the DM who ran this for me in the early 80s neglected to mention after I lost my dwarf. If you're listening, I'm not sore, honest, I'm just shaking my virtual fist at you. Incidentally, if you don't know the meaning of the asterisks next to the hit dice of these creatures, then please take a look at my BECMI Monsters video, link on the screen and in the description. The Evil Priest himself is only 3rd level, but armed with Plate Mail +1, a Shield +1, an Amulet of Protection against Good, and a Snake Staff for extra nuisance points. In addition to his memorized spells, he has several scrolls, and even a potion of gaseous form should he be badly damaged and wish to escape, leaving behind his lovely loot of course. This is a very difficult opponent to meet if not at full health, especially if joined by his Torturer friend from Room 61, who is a 3rd level fighter. That said, he does only have 14 hit points, and if forced to escape, he can make a nice recurring villain, especially since there is another Evil Priest already lurking back at the keep, which could be part of the same setup, or they may not. It's up to you. It's your game. Apart from having to face off these enemies, the Shrine of Evil Chaos also contains the Chapel of Evil Chaos, which contains a nasty and clever device that could potentially turn members of the party evil and force them to stay and defend the place. It's classic old school stuff, and I love it. So, on completing the Shrine of Evil Chaos, you may want the party to explore that boulder-strewn tunnel that may lead to the Cave of the Unknown I mentioned earlier, or you may want to just end the adventure there, presuming the rest of the Caves of Chaos has been cleared out. Now, you may remember I mentioned I had worked out how much treasure the Caves of Chaos actually has in it. Well, let's go through it. First, here is a list of all the magic items the caves contain. A pretty respectable haul. I do think it's a pretty poor return for magic users though. I know there's a couple of wands, but they're perishable. I think I would address this by adding a dead elf somewhere so their spellbook can be looted, and maybe a magical scroll of something in the Minotaur lair. In terms of monetary value, which of course translates to XP in BECMI and old school D&D, the total coinage for treasure found comes to the equivalent of 5,463 gold pieces. Not that impressive, but when you add in the total gem haul of 7,100, and art, jewels and other miscellanea coming to 14,155, we get a running total of 26,718 gold pieces. Nice. However, Keep on the Borderlands informs the Dungeon Master how much coin each creature is carrying on them, in the form of a random amount. For example, we might be told that each goblin in a cave carries 1d6 silver pieces. This can add up to a pretty amount. It was tedious, but I did roll for every single creature in the Caves of Chaos and got the following amounts. Okay, I got Excel to help, but at least I put the effort in. Anyway, the amount I generated was the equivalent of 531 gold pieces. Added to the earlier total, this makes a grand total of 27,249 gold pieces. Not bad, and a few characters would reach at least 3rd level I think. But what was your experience in gaining this haul? It would be interesting to hear views on how far it stretched. So in terms of this product's core offering, that's pretty much it. A keep, an untamed wilderness, and the Caves of Chaos. But in my opinion, this is a great example of how all campaigns should start. Small. We have a small tactical objective at the beginning. There's treasure in them thar hills. But after this there is potential and scope to widen things out. We've already spoken about the Cave of the Unknown, but what about that other evil priest I alluded to, who is living in the keep? Is the Castellan aware of him? Is the curate suspicious of him? How would the players learn of his nefarious plans? And, you know what? This is a pretty awesome keep. One of your players might start thinking it should be theirs. I mean, they have power and wealth now, and it's far enough away from civilization and any interfering authority to take it over quickly. In terms of how far from civilization the keep actually is, the 1983 release of the Expert Rules offered us recommended locations of 7 of the earliest published modules within its known world setting. So B2 was placed here, in the northeast of the Grand Duchy of Karamakos, nestled deep within the Oltentep mountain range, so incredibly difficult to access by hostile forces, and not a bad place to claim as your own if you reach high enough level and wish to explore the Dominion rules. You see, already the preliminary sketch of a campaign is turning into a picture. Add a little bit more intrigue and tug at the motivations of the characters, and you're pretty much there. And if you'd like more information about how to create a campaign by starting small, please consider watching my video on the subject, link on the screen and in the description. Before I offer you my closing thoughts, I should just mention a few more things that B2 contains, and that's these 2 pages of supportive game mechanical information, which prevent the need for constant reference to the rules booklets. There's also this really nice offering of one of the castle buildings, namely the guild house, as well as introductory text for new DMs on how to go about coming up with your own designs for the rest of the castle. And my favourite bit has to be this lovely glossary. Throughout the text of the module, some words have been accompanied by an asterisk. That meant that the meaning of the word was offered here. These words were thought to require further explanation. Not everyone knows what a murder hole is, or even a castellan. And I have to admit that my adolescent brain was more than amused that castles were adorned with braziers everywhere. And of course, I think that it's only right to point to the credits section here. Sure, Gary Gygax is credited as being the writer, but there are some real luminaries mentioned here that I'm sure had creative influence on the game's design, including BECMI's own Frank Mentzer. If you have any insight into any creative discussions that were had between this lot when designing this module, it would be great to read about them in the comments. So that's B2, the Keep on the Borderlands. What are my thoughts? Well, my objective when it came to this review was not to conflate nostalgic romanticism with this product. Its position in D&D lore is undisputed, but in terms of it being an actual useful product in the backdrop of today's publications, how does it fare? Well, it positions itself as an introductory module, and we've already seen how it coaches potential dungeon masters in learning the art, in respect of its instructional language, simple approach, and supportive material, so we can check that one off as achieved. As for the keep itself, we are given 27 locations in an extremely concise format, but which contains enough information to probe the imagine of those running the game, whilst also aligning with historical context. The map may be dated, but it's functional and doesn't distract one from using it for its purpose. Perhaps the weakest part of this module is the wilderness bit, but when you consider that this module was sold as a basic level scenario, having a wilderness section would be more relevant to expert level games. So there was no need to inject an intermediary area between the keep and the Caves of Chaos, but Gygax did, presumably to make things more interesting, and perhaps also to stop players just stating, "We leave the dungeon," and "We go back to the dungeon," without anything happening in between, which when you think about it is a bit of an exploit when you're carrying so much treasure around. I believe Gygax wanted to add some jeopardy to the journey, especially when considering the proximity of nearby raiders, otherwise there would be a bit of a fade to black moment, which could disturb the immersion. As for the Caves of Chaos, well, 64 locations in 10 pages. It doesn't sound possible, but it's here, in black and white, and a big blue map. Perhaps what could have fleshed out these areas a bit more might have been improved room descriptions, but of course you would have to compromise on the use of page count. Or would you? What's interesting is the choice of just 28 pages for this module over the standard 32, especially when so much real estate was given over to supportive material. B1, In Search of the Unknown, and B3, Palace of the Silver Princess, both had 32 pages, so why not B2? If anyone knows of a logistical or design reason for this, please put it in the comments, but one could argue the loss of 4 pages constrained the content. I mean, what if you left things as they are, but gave those 4 pages over to the Cave of the Unknown? That could have taken this module to another level, but as it is, it still holds up incredibly well, and the very absence of complexity in plot and presentation makes it incredibly accessible for players of all generations. In my opinion, this is why B2 holds incredibly sentimental value to those who have walked its castle walls, its muddy trails, and its dark dungeons. It's symbolic of the D&D experience, but perhaps even greater than that, it's a fun and very easy adventure to play, requiring minimal effort on the part of the players and the Dungeon Master. It's what you make it, and I think that's exactly what players over the last 50 years did, and what future players will be doing for a very long time. Overall, the Keep on the Borderlands is an excellent introductory module, and an excellent sandbox of an adventure that we can all and have all made our own. And so that's it. I hope you have enjoyed my review and walkthrough of B2, the Keep on the Borderlands. What's been your experience of it? Do you have any tales to tell of your own explorations? Any comical twists of fate? Or even dark dealings of treachery within the party? How did your players fare against the Medusa? Or even the Wight? It would be great to know. Otherwise, please give this video a like if you did indeed like it, and please hit the subscribe button if I've earned your future attention. If you'd like to thank me further, you can buy me a coffee, link on the screen or in the description. I'm BECMI Berserker. Keep making your saving throws, and I hope to see you back here soon.